Happy Monday afternoon. That means it's time to talk about the box office. It's charting with Mr. Dan Murrell.
Hello, hello.
Hello, I'm excited. This is another big weekend for Black Panther.
Another big weekend for Black Panther and a smaller than expected weekend for A Wrinkle in Time. This was the weekend that a lot of people circled on their calendars as the weekend that Black Panther would lose the #1 spot at the box office. They thought perhaps that Ava DuVernay's movie would knock it off the top of the box office. A little Disney on Disney cannibalism. Turned out to be not handily, but a fairly easy win, about $7 million difference between Black Panther and A Wrinkle in Time. Black Panther stays #1, dropping less than 40% in week 4. It still has the highest per screen average of any movie in wide release at $10,355 per theater. To put that into perspective, Black Panther this week in week 4 had a higher per screen average than any wide release other than Black Panther has had this year, period, and the most since the holiday season with Jumanji, with Star Wars. So even in week 4, and The Greatest Showman, holding on. So even in week 4, Black Panther per screen, pound for pound, still holding its own.
Yeah, the average drop-off is pretty remarkable on this film. Yep. It is holding so well week to week. People are seeing it again. I think that word of mouth is doing it a ton of good. It's certainly in the zeitgeist at the moment. A Wrinkle of Time, conversely, is a movie that is largely, and we've talked about a little bit about this, aimed towards kids. It's very much structured as a child's movie. It speaks more to a very young audience than an adult audience. This way a Pixar movie can say transcend a little bit. Mm-hmm. It is very mixed reviews critically to poor reviews
mixed
critically.
To poor, yeah. I mean, in the 40s-ish
40s on Rotten Tomatoes.
And the cinema score, which is so often kind of the indicator of where the movie-going public lands. It got a B cinema score, Wrinkle in Time did, which for a movie that is supposed to be a 4-quadrant kind of big headline banner release, that's not good. You don't want it may sound good, a B cinema score, but a B cinema score is not what you want, particularly on something that skews younger, and that with a lower opening is going to rely on word of mouth to maybe make up some of that money that it didn't get on opening weekend. So there's a lot of hype and buzz going around A Wrinkle in Time, and doused a little bit both with the reception of the movie and with its box office performance.
Yeah, it's also one of those movies, and we did discuss this as well. This is one of those movies that it's based on a book series that is beloved by many, but it is not a Marvel character. It's not a DC character. It's not a franchise that's built in. It's a very difficult to adapt book. Mm-hmm. And the two leads are, especially the lead, you've got Oprah in this movie, and there's certainly a draw. But the lead is a little girl that is new. She's fantastic, by the way. But it's in a movie that feels very uneven to critics, and I think is maybe less accessible to fans. But man, Black Panther keeps going here domestically, and as we'll see, in the world.
Yeah, well, let's look at how it's doing. We've been kind of tracking it weekend by weekend, and the reason that we're doing this is because it keeps doing well historically amongst that weekend. So this is Black Panther's 4th weekend. Let's take a look and see how it stacks up against just general 4th weekends. Number 3 on this list, it is almost, if you look at those grosses, it is performing, as far as this weekend goes, almost neck and neck with Star Wars The Force Awakens. Now, Force Awakens had, up to this point, a very sizable lead as far as what it was making day to day, week to week over Black Panther. At least for this weekend, Black Panther is actually performing very similar to what The Force Awakens did in its 4th weekend, although, as we say, it's a different time of year. There's lots of X factors just on a sheer numbers standpoint. By the way, if you look at the other movies on this list, Avatar, Force Awakens, The Avengers, Jurassic World, those 4 movies happen to also be 4 of the top 5 grossers of all time at the domestic box office, which is where Black Panther is making some serious headway. It passed The Dark Knight, as we talked about on SGU this morning, to become the 7th highest grossing domestic release of all time. And then this morning we talked about inflation, and I saw some discussion around when we say adjusting for inflation, and particularly adjusting for inflation with Black Panther. A lot of people are saying, like, well, why are you trying to deflate, it's number 7 all-time domestically, so when you adjust for inflation, like, are you kind of trying to deflate what Black Panther's performance is? Not at all. For me, actually, I'm trying to inflate it, because I feel like that you can deflate it by saying, like, well, it's only number 7 if you don't adjust for inflation, but when you do. However, again, adjusting for inflation, it is now the 58th highest grossing release of all time. I don't care who you are. You have now made more money than all but 50 or than all but 57 other movies ever made. Black Panther has surpassed Close Encounters of the Third Time, Back to the Future 2, Superman 1978, Spider-Man 2, adjusted for inflation. So, I can't speak for everyone else, but when I adjust Black Panther's numbers for inflation, it's not to decrease its performance. I think if you put it in perspective, it's even more impressive that you can't just say like, well, adjusted for inflation doesn't count. These are landmark movies, Close Encounters, Back to the Future, Superman 2, all the other ones that are underneath it. It's going to keep passing them. It's going to be in the top 50.
Yeah.
So for me, adjusting for inflation is a way of adding perspective to kind of the impact and particularly the financial impact of the box office performance that this movie's having, not decreasing it or trying to let the air out of its performance, because I think, when you're getting into rarefied air here.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're looking at the long term versus the short, I mean, look, somebody could say, well, number 7 versus 58. I mean, if you're looking at it with your view, you're saying in the entire history of cinema.
Yeah.
Putting this in perspective.
57 of the movies.
57 of all of the movies
ever made,
of which there are, Mike, how many have been made? There are hundreds per year.
Yeah.
We're into
tens of thousands.
Yes.
Yeah.
So of all of those movies, this is in the range to hit into the top 50 of all time. Yeah. That is massively impressive. What this movie has done is truly remarkable, and I think that only underscores that and highlights it. We're looking at the number 1 solo superhero movie of all time. Yeah. It's edging up to be the number 1 Marvel movie potentially if it breaks the Avengers record.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a juggernaut.
It's a juggernaut. And I think that the more perspective you add to it and the more ways that you can frame it and look at its performance, I think that only deepens. I don't think it decreases the more angles you look at what Black Panther's doing, particularly after 1 month. Just think about this. In 1 month of release, 1 month, adjusted for inflation, Black Panther's made more money than a movie like Back to the Future, which ran in the 80s, back when at 85, for weeks, months in theaters, was a phenomenon. It's still a classic. I don't think that decreases anything about its legacy and its performance. I think it only adds to that. I also want to revisit a chart that we saw last weekend, Mcu Top Grocers Worldwide. They said last week that we might be sitting here talking about Black Panther becoming the 5th Marvel movie to break $1 billion worldwide. Well, it did it. It has crossed $1 billion, largely from a $66 million debut in China, which is a really strong debut for a superhero movie over there. Black Panther is now just the 5th MCU movie to break $1 billion. It is the 33rd movie in history to gross $1 billion. It is now ranked the 21st highest grossing global release of all time. It will very soon, probably today or tomorrow, pass The Dark Knight Rises to enter the top 20 highest grossing global earners of all time. So another milestone, again, that a lot of people said would be out of reach for this movie. As with everything else, so many other records and limitations that people thought this movie might run into.
Now, the global appeal is phenomenal. I can't wait to see where it sits at the end of the run and the end of the year.
Yeah.
Is there a movie, I mean, I hate to be the one to speculate on this, is there a movie that's going to top it? Of course, we're thinking Infinity War has that chance, but maybe not.
I mean,
they're going to be neck and neck.
Infinity War, I don't know. Black Panther is something special. It is tapped into something special, more than just a popular comic book movie. It's really tapped into something. It's a phenomenon. It's a phenomenon in the way that we categorize, in the way that The Greatest Showman in its own way was also a phenomenon as far as picking up steam, longevity. Black Panther is a phenomenon as far as just performance, the cultural impact, everything else. Those are things that I don't think Infinity War necessarily is going to have going for it. But at the same time, it is a huge Marvel event team up movie. If I were a betting man and you asked me what movie is going to make more money, Black Panther or Infinity War, I would split the difference. I think that Black Panther is going to out-earn Infinity War domestically, but I think Infinity War may out-earn Black Panther globally. But
I think you're probably right.
It's just a guess.
I think you're probably right, but it's going to be an interesting neck and neck race. Yeah. Man, happy Marvel.
Happy Marvel, yeah, happy Disney. Speaking of Disney, not so happy going back to the top 5. About A Wrinkle in Time, we mentioned that it opened with $33 million. This is not the figure. I think it's kind of undebatable. This is not the figure that Disney would have hoped for. The movie was, kind of famously budgeted at over $100 million. I saw a New York Times article that estimated it had $150 million plus advertising and promotion budget. So you're looking at probably about $250-ish million that Disney put into the movie. Now, family films do have legs traditionally, but this is a movie. It got a B cinema score, as we mentioned before. It's going to roll out worldwide over the next month, so we'll see how it does. But I was kind of looking for things that I thought would kind of be analogous to this movie, its target audience, and perhaps its legs. And the closest one that I could kind of hit on was back in 2004, Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, aimed at families, based on a popular series of kids' books. It opened to $30 million back in 2004, wound up grossing 118, although that was during the holiday season. So I think that might be the range where Disney could be looking at A Wrinkle in Time finishing around, at least domestically. We'll see what it does globally.
Yeah.
But again, not the performance I think that they would have wanted from the film, given the prestige of, the lead. I agree, an unknown young lead, but Chris Pine, Oprah. I mean, just if it was just Oprah, Oprah the movie, you would, Reese Witherspoon, Mindy Kaling.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, I mean, Chris Pine, look, we don't have a review of the movie. The movie is not perfect at all. And I certainly understand the mixed reviews for it. Chris Pine's quite good.
There you go.
He's quite good in it.
Are you saying we might be in a Pine-assance?
I think that it's interesting about Chris Pine, right? Because everything he's in, I've not seen him be bad.
Yeah.
I really haven't. But if you think of him in the support roles in these big movies, recently Wonder Woman and A Wrinkle in Time, where he is not the lead character, he's great.
Yeah.
He's great in that role too. Comes in.
Hit cleanup.
He hits it up.
Yep. This is the lowest opening for Disney for a wide release since 2016. Summer of 2016, a lot of people forget, Disney had a trio of underperformers. They had the BFG from Steven Spielberg. They had Alice Through the Looking Glass, which is a big high-profile flop that summer. And then they had Pete's Dragon, which is a movie that I enjoyed but didn't do great at the box office. So a rare low-level opening for Disney with A Wrinkle in Time. One movie that did actually do well compared to its budget, The Strangers, Pray at Night, the sequel to The Strangers, opened at $10 million off a $5 million budget, so doubled their budget on the opening weekend. You see this more and more with the horror genre. You make a horror movie for cheap, and even if it didn't have a particularly strong cinema score, so it's probably not going to have huge legs, but get double that budget on the first weekend. We'll see how it does internationally. Red Sparrow dropped 50% to number 4 in its second weekend. Not a great performance for that movie, it looks like, at least not here. Game Night, this is a movie that it's kind of been flying under the radar. It dropped 24.5% in week 3. It's staying in the top 10. We'll look at the domestic chart. It jumps into the top 10 moneymakers. Comedies, again, good comedies tend to have legs, and Game Night is a movie that's, not busting the doors down as far as box office, but it's holding pretty strong. And
it probably is a reasonable moneymaker return on investment for that film. Yeah. And good for Warner Brothers, too, because they had a string of really terrible comedies last year with Chips.
They did.
And,
I think
Fist Fight.
Fist Fight, I believe. The House. Yeah, The House was one of theirs.
All of those were Warner Brothers. So good for them. They made a great one this year, and it's doing well. I mean, I haven't seen it, but I hear it's really good.
Well, it is really good. It had great word of mouth. It's a movie that I recommended. It's sticking around. It'll probably follow the top 5, I would guess, next week probably. But, yeah.
We're entering a period of time that there's going to start to be some pretty stiff competition at the box office too. So I would say with Disney, I mean, I bet they are a little disappointed with A Wrinkle in Time. I'm not imagining that it's going to be an uphill battle, I think, for this movie. Maybe it's one of those things that becomes beloved by kids over time. I'm not sure.
It's very possible. The interesting thing, if you're Disney, looking at the year so far, obviously Black Panther, an unqualified success.
Yeah.
No question about it. Last Jedi, a financial success, but I think some questions regarding the legs of Star Wars moving forward. Wrinkle in Time, which I think, at least domestically, people are going to probably regard as a disappointment as far as the box office goes. And then if Solo underperforms, then you could potentially be looking at 3 out of 4 Disney releases with some question marks of some type lingering around it, which is not a position they are familiar with.
Oh no, Disney. It's funny. I heard someone on the radio this morning phrase it this way, and I think it's absolutely true. Disney is in the business of home runs. Mm-hmm. They are not in the business of anything other than that. And so I think probably, as shocking as it would be, there would be some meetings in the next several months if they do, if Solo does,
Hello. Yes.
if that does underperform, which,
Yeah.
it's not out yet, so you don't want to make judgments, but
Yeah. And I guess the Infinity War would be out before Solo, so it'd be 3 out of 5. Yeah. Some things that were not competition for A Wrinkle in Time, though, were Hurricane Heist. That opened out of the top 10 from Rob Cohen. $3 million opening off a $35 million budget. Ouch. And then Gringo from Amazon Studios. That opened out of the top 10 $2.7 million. Shape of Water added about 700 theaters. Took in about $2.3 million off of its box office win. So there you go.
That's great. Shape didn't get that. Man, I wish the Oscar gave it more of a little kick.
Yeah, I mean it was a big boost week to week.
Yeah.
But overall, it's hovering around $60 million here. I think 130 worldwide. So that's fine. That's not bad. But
Not bad at all.
Not a breakout hit. As we talked about that last week. There has not been a breakout hit as far as a best picture winner in quite some time.
Yeah. Well, there's a film that is the top per screen this week, which I haven't seen yet, but I heard the director actually on the radio the other day, and this just sounds fascinating. So I was so excited to see it in the top per screen because maybe that means it'll get a little more attention, a little more run.
Yeah, Armando Iannucci's The Death of Stalin, which has been released in some places. I think it came out last year in the UK. It's just now getting here to the US. Now, if you're in the UK, you probably know Armando Iannucci. He had a lot to do with the Alan Partridge, different various TV series. I'm Alan Partridge and The Day Today, Knowing Me, Knowing You, which you haven't seen, are hilarious from the 90s and early 2000s. He did a movie called The Thick of It, which was hilarious and profane and stars Peter Capaldi in a very not Doctor Who part. U.S. viewers.
He's a salty Who.
He's a salty Who. U.S. viewers, you probably know him as the creator of Veep, Armando Iannucci.
Yes.
But yeah, he does this movie called The Death of Stalin. It's kind of a political satire set after the death of Stalin in Russia.
Yeah.
It's a comedy.
I love him. I love Veep. And it's interesting when he was talking about the making of this movie, obviously we'll just say this really quickly. So hopefully you guys will go see this. I know I'm going to.
It's gotten very strong reviews.
Yeah. And it's a film that's meant to, of course, it's dealing with Stalin and the nature of the time. It's a satirical comedy. It's dealing with dark and heavy subject matter. It's not dismissing the weight of what Stalin did, but it's doing it as he does in a satirical manner. But he also, one of the choices that he made that I thought was so interesting was he allowed the actors to speak in their native accent. So if they were American, they spoke with an American accent. If they had a Cockney accent, if they had a Scottish accent. And the reason that he did that was threefold. One, we often get Russian accents wrong. Hi, Red Sparrow. And,
Jeremy Irons, great actor.
Great actor.
Not the best Russian accent. Bad accent. That's a good video. Great actors, bad accents.
When great actors are inundated with bad accents. So that was one of the reasons which I thought was so smart. And he said when he screened it in Russia, they were like, thank you. But the second one is he was like, in Russia, there are so many different dialects. So there would be an array of accents on the same language. And so if he's casting different English-speaking actors with a variety of accents, that actually reflects Russia more. And then 3 was to give you the sense that this isn't something remote that's so different than you.
Right.
This could affect you like that. We are all sort of subject to these same whims of political forces. So really fascinating sounding movie. I highly recommend you see it.
Yeah.
Even though I haven't seen it yet, I'm still excited to see it.
And recently I was reading Made Some News that there was a theater in Russia that defied a sort of, as you can imagine, some very negative feelings about this movie amongst the higher ups in Russia. There was a theater in Russia that recently defied that and is currently being punished for showing The Death of Stalin. So I hope not either.
I hope they're okay.
I hope so too. Death of Stalin, very limited release here in the U.S. I'm sure we'll be expanding in the weeks to come, so check out that. The domestic chart, 2018. Not a lot has changed. As I mentioned before, Game Night, based off some really strong holds since its opening a couple weeks ago, jumps into the top 10 at number 7, knocking down Den of Thieves, Paddington, the Commuter, and we say goodbye to the 1517 to Paris, Fare Thee Well, Clint Eastwood. Other than that, as you can see, Black Panther continuing to rack up the box office. 50 Shades Freed on the cusp of $100 million. Peter Rabbit also on the cusp of $100 million. Can't think of any films different than those two, but both connecting with audiences.
Very weird Double feature.
Very strange double feature.
Paddington deserved you know what?
Paddington deserved more.
Paddington deserved more love.
Well,
It's
I mean
okay.
that
Nothing against the rabbit.
but Paddington was dumped by the Weinstein or the company formerly known as the Weinstein Company to Warner Brothers at the very last minute that affected its overall haul. It did okay worldwide, but I'm with you. Paddington 2 deserves so much more than it got. As to the first Paddington,
movie.
Really good movie. Looking at the worldwide chart, just a little bit of a shuffle there. Operation Red Sea jumps up to the number 2 spot. Again, 3 out of the top 5 here are Chinese films. 2 out of the bottom 5 are also Chinese films. Peter Rabbit hopping up the list. It's kind of starting its worldwide rollout, so it's jumped up to number 8. Other than that, everything stays pretty much the same. Black Panther, you're going to see up at the top of that chart for at least a few months. We'll see how Infinity War does, unless Solo kind of surprises everybody. And
you never know.
You never know what to expect. But Black Panther is going to be at the top of that chart for a while. And who knows if any of the movies that are opening this week will jump on that list. We have Tomb Raider.
Mix.
Tomb Raider opening super wide.
Will it break the video game movie curse?
Break the video game movie curse? I don't know. I've actually not heard anything about Tomb Raider. I might be seeing it this week. I'm not sure yet.
I have heard some mixed things.
So maybe yes, maybe no.
Maybe yes, maybe
Either way, it's opening super wide, over 3,600 theaters. A movie that I have seen and that I reviewed right here a couple weeks ago on ScreenJunkies News, and I'll probably tweet it out this week to get a signal boost because it's a really, really funny, cute, endearing movie called Love, Simon. That opens at over 2,400 theaters, and you should see it. I've seen it. I recommend it. It's really good. That's all I have to say about Love, Simon. You should go see
based
it.
on your review, I'm planning to get my ticket.
Yeah. 2 more movies. Roadside Attractions is opening I Can Only Imagine, which is kind of aimed at a religious audience nationwide this weekend. And then 7 Days in Entebbe, which is from director Jose Padilla, is opening in 800 theaters, so a bit more of a limited release. But
that one is to do with that. I watched that one actually.
Did you see it?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, I love the trailers. It's on our list. Like we started. It looks really good.
Yeah, it's to do with the hostage crisis. Yeah. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
I think it is one you should see, and we will discuss.
Well, if it's playing near you, check out the reviews and maybe you should see it too. That's it. That's all the charts that I got, Roth. Black Panther. We'll see it. Does it spend week 5 at the top of the list? Can it weather the storm of Tomb Raider? Or will Lara Croft
unseat the Panther?
The king of the box office?
I'm gonna wager a guess.
What do you think?
I think Black Panther holds on. I think it holds the number 1. That's what I think.
I'm gonna say it's close. But I'm going to say Tomb Raider.
All right.
Barely comes out on top. We'll see.
All right. You guys let us know what you think in the comments below. We'll be back here on Monday to fulfill our destiny and to find out who won this wager. Probably Dan is my guess. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching as always, and we will see you next week.